Okay, so I'm Colleen. I'm the president of 43 North and honored to be here today with Devin, one of our founders from GroupRaise, as well as Julie from the Buffalo Public Schools. So Devin, why don't we just start, give us context of what you're up to right now and a little bit about GroupRaise, just so we set the kind of table, no pun intended, as to what your business is that you're currently running.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me. It's a big pleasure to be here and talk to folks. We're in the seat that I was in when I was in high school. Hopefully this will be illuminative. So I'm the founder of a company called GroupRaise. We like to think of GroupRaise as the most delicious way to change the world. But what we do is we help restaurants connect with community organizations like schools, churches, universities, groups like that. And they book dates with our restaurant partners and go out to eat. These days, order takeout, and a percentage of the sales is donated back to a charitable cause. So lots of organizations, if you've ever gone to a restaurant and eaten where a percentage goes back, we're an online platform to book that. We started that business in Houston, and now it's in just over 500 cities, working with about 10,000 restaurants, and it's grown a lot. We've had a lot of lessons and successes and failures along the way, and we're super honored to be a part of 43 North and continue to grow in the adventure.
Awesome. That's perfect, Devin. So let's take a trip down memory lane to high school for you. Tell us kind of, bring us to where you were physically in terms of geography, what your school was like, big or small.
Yeah, so I went to high school at a high school called Dulles High School in Sugar Land. So I actually, my story always starts with my mom, like many people's stories. My mom was a huge advocate for me. I grew up in a low-income community that had a lot of crime, but then I went to school in a very affluent area, and my mom was denied 7 times to get an interdistrict transfer so that I could go to this other school, and on the 8th time, I got it. And so I always grew up in this kind of intersection of two worlds, where I went to high school. Fort Bend County is the most diverse county in the country. So I think there are 150 first generation immigrant children who were there. So I grew up with kids from all over the world. It's kind of cool to see all the kind of immigration that's in Buffalo as well. But I lived in a community, I went to church in a community that was mainly African-American Black. And so, my high school experience was kind of this experience of living in two worlds, seeing how different environments functioned and worked. My high school, I graduated in the class of 600, so kind of depending on where you are, a big environment. I started high school less motivated academically, but I was always interested in business and entrepreneurship. I was always interested in music. I was in the band. And that kind of drive to want to make a big impact in the world, made me want to focus on studies when I realized that I needed to do that to be successful. So definitely, I was really good at the kind of math that allowed you to figure out the exact grade you needed to get a certain letter grade. You can't have too many zeros, and got really good at averages to know how my mom will kick me in the face if I get a C or if I get a D. What do I exactly need to score on this exact test so I don't fail? And I didn't know at the time that was actually harder math than most of the math I got presented. But yeah.
A lot of our students would relate to that for sure.
Yeah. I was not I was definitely focused on other places sometimes.
Devin, I get a sense you had figured out the business was of an interest to you, particularly entrepreneurship. Did you figure that out in middle school, or were there a class that triggered that, or a club or family member, or where did that come from?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember exactly the origin story of it. So it came in 2 ways. The one, my dad had a small consulting company that he set up networks back when people were still laying like original fiber to get the internet in businesses, and that was the thing. So I helped him, like we did the theater district in Houston where we laid like all the cable, me and my brother, which looking back, we didn't even get paid. We were just like slave labor for my dad to do these things. But I worked for him, and he took me to I had this idea for a business that was starting to run gaming tournaments. So when I was in high school, I loved playing video games, and I got this idea for doing at the time, Halo was a really big game, a Halo tournament. And my dad helped me set up an entity and go to the like courthouse and like file a DBA, and just like what the basic requirements were for incorporating in a way that would allow you to take money from other individuals to do something. And I just remember like not being able to sleep. Like, you know, people talk about the entrepreneurial bug and when it bites you, but I would just like, I would, you know, in plotting and launching the website and launching the like forms and selling tickets, I just couldn't sleep. I was just so excited. And that was like when I realized, I was probably my sophomore year in high school, that I just loved business, and I loved like the idea of creating something out of nothing. And it just was a really big, thrilling feeling for me.
Understood, totally. So talk about when you weren't in classes or figuring out the test score that you did. What were you up to? I mean, I'm just sensing that business probably had you quite busy, but were there sports?
Yeah, so I was in the marching band, played trumpet for 6 years. Loved that. It was a lot of fun. Like here, football culture is massive, right? Texas, Friday Night Lights, that idea. Congratulations on the Buffalo Mafia. You guys are doing good this season.
This week was tough.
This week was tough. I watched the game. It was a tough week, but overall, you're having I mean, 4-1's not bad. The Texans are like, you know, 1-4, so you guys are doing great. Yeah, so I enjoyed that. I was in debate, which was like really fun, and was probably the most like practical intellectualism that I ever got, actually. It was really great opportunity to just think about logic and presentation and speaking, which really is an important skill that translated over really well for me. So I think a lot of that came from debate. In addition to being in the marching band, I had my own band in high school that we like gigged restaurants and bars and parks, and that actually had a lot to do with how I got started with GroupRaise, was meeting lots of restaurant owners through the experience of playing from a very young age up through that process. So that was always fun. And then I played sports. I played football. I didn't play for the high school team, but played because I was in the marching band, but played a lot of kind of scrimmages and had a lot of fun with that side of the experience as well.
Awesome, so busy. If there was something you could have done differently, is there anything that comes to mind in regards to kind of the high school years?
Anything I would have done differently? So, I mean, I don't know if I would have done anything differently, because I have a hard time. I'm very thankful the way my life has come out, but I think there were things that I wish I would have understood sooner, you know, which really just like recognizing the importance of knowing like kind of what I want to do and what it will take to get there, and like working backwards from that as soon as possible, right? I think putting an effort to like get good mentors, you know, just thinking about like who are the folks who've done things that I want to do, and how do I seek those folks out and make sure that I'm with them so that I can hear how they think about the world and they can help navigate me. It's one thing. I mean, I think some of the things I discovered were I lived a pretty a pretty compartmentalized life for a part of my time in high school. So there was a time in high school, so like where I, in one kind of area in like my church life, I had a persona, and then I had a different persona with my friends. And I think that time in my life taught me a lot. I was afraid to give up my youth, and I thought that like if I didn't party, if I didn't go out, if these things, that I wouldn't have a fun and fulfilling life. And there was like a moment where I decided I didn't want to have a compartmentalized life, that I wanted to live out my values in all the settings. And I think that was just the best decision of my life. And I learned that I wasn't missing out on anything, and that I've had so much fun, like being able to travel the world and build businesses and meet great people. And that fun didn't live in the kind of like, didn't live in alcohol, it didn't live in relationships, it didn't live in these kind of things that I think are very alluring in high school, that are very like there. And now, like, you know, kind of decades later, right, I'm very confident that that's a common kind of refrain that you see. It's a common kind of tempting deal, but it's just such a better deal, focusing on the things you want for your future and building great relationships outside of those methods.
Awesome.
Before I
Great.
jump to college, Julie, do you have anything regarding high school for Devin?
Oh, that's where I was going to go next too. I mean, that was a great like self-realization, I think, too, that sometimes it takes longer than others to, you know, really live by your core values in all aspects of your life. You know, that. So I think that, you know, is a really great lesson for our kids. So thank you for sharing that.
Hi, Gabby, are you there?
Oh, yes, hi.
Nice.
Hi, Gabby.
Hi.
Here she
Hey.
is. Again, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I want you to meet Devin.
Hey,
He's today from Texas.
Oh, hi.
how are you doing?
Good.
Would you mind introducing yourself real quick, Gabby? Like what classes you're in, what grade you're in, where you're going to school?
Sure. So my name is Gabrielle. I go to International Preparatory High School, and I am in the 11th grade. I'm currently in a BOSS program, and they teach us to like be a leader, like teach us about leadership and things like that. So
I think, Gabby, Devin would appreciate, we were talking earlier about the immigrant population in Texas. How many languages are spoken at IPrep again? Like over 100?
yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's where a lot of our immigrants kids attend. It's unbelievable to walk through the walls there or the halls there and hear, like, you know, there's a beauty to it for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Gabby, we just finished high school, so we're going to jump into college with Devin. Okay, so just like yesterday, ask your questions or interrupt us if something doesn't make sense. Okay, we want you to be a part of the conversation.
Okay.
Okay, so Devin, talk to us. So you graduated from high school in Texas, and then where did you go?
Yeah, so I spent my first year at UTSA, which is University of Texas at San Antonio. Actually, Paul's dad went there. Paul, my CTO now. So I've known Paul since we were like on the playground, like very young. So
Wow,
Paul went to the same high school as me. So you never know who will end up being your co-founder in the future. We definitely didn't like, weren't working on business back then. We were like playing with Pokemon cards and video games, but turned out to be a long-term relationship. But his dad went to UTSA, and I got invited to do the honors program there, and he gave this like speech at a like kind of a gala, and I was like, Paul turned out great, and his dad was really successful, so if his dad went to UTSA, I could probably go too. That's like the only thought I remember kind of having. And so I went to UTSA. I went in studying political science. That was, you know, kind of, even though I was interested in business, I think I've always been interested or around the way humans connect and kind of what that was. And so and my brother did political science, and so I think I was just looking up to him, and so went to UTSA, and UTSA was a really cool experience for me. My first year there, I built like lots of good relationships with, like, I think college is just as much about people skills as it is about education. And so made some really, really great friends. But at the end of my first year there, I started a music festival that I guess the backstory is there. I was in a band in high school, really loved it. College was still in that band, and I wanted to play 1,000-person show. That was like our dream. But then there was no one who would hire us to play 1,000-person show. Like, we were kind of random. So I was like, but if I make the festival and I can headline it, I'm the decision maker. So I did, and that was this very interesting experience. So we booked. We didn't actually book the venue. So uh, I printed flyers, planned this event, invited my closest 10,000 friends to come to this park. That I didn't actually book with the city. I learned in the middle of the process I had to book it with the city, and then that cost like a couple $1,000s. So then I had to go and fundraise this money to be able to get this venue. And so I remember just like knots in my stomach. It was like a week away from the event, and I still hadn't successfully booked it. And there were like 10,000 people who had been invited to come to this place that I didn't have booked. And we were donating most of the money actually to charity. So one of my bandmates had spent time working with kids who had muscular dystrophy over the summer, and had just seen what the MDA does with those kids and like how valuable that is. And so we wanted to donate, I think, $2,000 to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, have 1,000 people come and do this show at this park here in Houston. And I went, this was probably one of the places where I got most of my skills. I called to get everything donated for this event. So I probably made 500-600 phone calls to local businesses to get them to donate the stage and the wood and porta potties and ice and drinks and sponsors. And we ended up getting sponsored by a motorcycle company. And I still needed like $1,000 for the park, and I was like 2 days away from the deadline, and I was really tired. And one of the girls I went to high school with came in town, and she invited me to dinner with her family. And I was like super busy and kind of burned out, and I was worried that it wouldn't work out. But I was like, you know what, I'll just go to this dinner. When I went to that dinner, turned out her dad was the president of a local bank. And he, was kind of telling them what I was up to, and he was like, oh, why don't you come to the bank tomorrow and we'll talk about it. And he wrote a check to sponsor the event. And actually my college roommate wrote a check as well, because he'd been a server at Red Lobster, and he decided he wanted to support. So this is like probably my first kind of quote unquote investor was from this experience. And we turned in the money just in time, and it was like one of those moments in life where there were like literally 1,000 people there. We had 13 bands. We were over water because it was in a water venue. And we built a team of about 20 volunteers who helped with the event. And that was this like experience that made me just see how powerful teamwork was, see how powerful, and for me, like faith, like it was a moment where I remember just being in my car, like praying to God that I would not be made foolish in front of like every person in the city. And that experience of that coming through, and it built my faith. It ended like on a stage with 1,000 people, and one of the most fun days of my life. And that was like a moment, that was really the moment where I was like, you know what, I have to do business. I have to do things that I can't imagine of how I would do without others' support and without faith. And I kind of wanted to constantly push my life to be in a spot where the equation didn't fit. Like I didn't know what all the components were, but I knew that I would need others' help and God to achieve. And that's when I switched my major to business. And that drove me to leave San Antonio and come back to Houston actually to go to business school at UTSA, sorry, not UTSA, at the University of St. Thomas, which is a small private liberal arts college here in the city of Houston.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How come you couldn't finish your studies at the college you were at? How come, what made you change to the other college?
So I liked the business school specifically. It was the Cameron School of Business. The professors there, like when I looked at the kind of program, what they were focused on, I liked it better than the UTSA Business School at the time. And then when I applied, I ended up getting a scholarship to go there. And then it was one of those experiences where, and this is a true story, like I prayed about it and it's like, I'm going to get into UTSA, I'm going to get a scholarship, and I'm going to get a dog. And the dog's name is going to be Macy, and it's going to be a husky, and I'm going to go back to Houston. It's going to happen. And I remember going back to Houston, getting the scholarship on the day of the orientation, going back to my house, and a husky walked just from my neighborhood, walked in my door, and I named her Macy. And she was just a stray dog, a stray husky, walked to my house.
Stop. Wait. Really?
True story. True story. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, and I was like, yep, this is where I'm supposed to be. Yeah.
I would think so too. Wow.
Yeah. So like, really like kind of crazy experience in terms of going back to Houston. And when I got back to Houston, I studied at St. Thomas. I studied finance and philosophy. So that was the kind of update. Spent a lot of time in just kind of learning about business all along the way, probably right around the time of the music festival. There's a program that Stanford has that's called the Stanford Ed Corner that essentially has every talk from entrepreneurs who come and talk at Stanford for the last like 15 years online for free. And that was really the basis of my like business education. And so I watched probably every single one of the lectures from 10 years of every speaker who talked about high growth entrepreneurship. And that was the kind of foundation for me to have knowledge about like being like more interested in entrepreneurship, and then more interested in high growth tech entrepreneurship in specific. That's still online today, and I still go and watch lectures or rewatch lectures from those speakers.
Wow.
It's everything from like David Neilman, who was the founder of JetBlue, to obviously you have Google and Microsoft and those guys, but then you can find just a huge range of speakers. Like I saw just all walks of life talking very candidly about their entrepreneurial journeys and how they got into it. And it was just a place for me to just get very high quality mentorship, like kind of digital mentorship for free. And it always struck me that like probably never in history could I have been in those rooms, and like through the internet allowed me to get this really high quality education on that as well.
Yeah, I want to look that up. And Julie, I'm sure you do want to note that for the students.
Yeah,
That's really
definitely. Thank you.
Devin, a lot of the students have concerns around going to college, right? And the transition just from a life perspective, right? You used to be a guardian, and then all of a sudden you're in a dorm room on your own, right? So how was that for you? I know you went away and then came back to Houston, but just talk through any advice you might have for someone that's a little fearful of walking into a dining hall and not knowing anyone, or going into a classroom without your friends. Is there any advice you have to kind of overcome that fear?
Yeah, I mean, I think moments in your life where you're discomforted, you're not comfortable, are the moments you'll grow the most. And so I'd say like any opportunity you have to be uncomfortable, take it. It's hard, But when I look back on my life, it was those moments that really forged me, that made me. And I think that that's like a lot of what college is. You get to have your own identity. You get to realize like how you make decisions versus how your parents make decisions. You get to build new relationships, right? If there was something you didn't, some area you wanted to improve in, you know, there's an opportunity for you to kind of reforge the way you approach life, the way you approach education, the way you approach relationships. And I think that a lot of, you know, it's hard to think, you know, very long term, I think sometimes when you're younger. But the real big benefit is uh, those relationships last you a very long time, right? So if you want to, you know, if you want to just think about social opportunities where everyone else is also going through that same thing, where everyone else is also looking for new friends, everyone else is also trying to figure out who they are, everyone else is in that same moment of life, and that kind of experience gives you just so much warmth and a depth of relationship, and there's that opportunity for that. And so I would say long term, you know, as much as the degree is valuable, building a network of people who have gone through that experience together will last you a really long time. And I met my other co-founder Kevin at college at St. Thomas, and you know, we were like taking finance classes and kind of competing for grades and talking about business, and that relationship has lasted, you know, for more than a decade now, and it's still going on, right? And will last a really long time. So I think, you know, you never know the relationships that you'll miss if you don't go take that risk.
We heard a very similar message yesterday from Lauren, didn't we, Gabby?
Yeah.
Did you have any questions for Devin about college?
I think Lauren really cleared up most of them up, but I wanted to know who inspired you to do what you do now?
That's a great question. And I kind of have a weird answer. So one is, well, I'll do my weird answer and then I'll tell you a couple of other people. So one is, so my grandmother and my mom, so my grandmother was the first Black woman to vote in her parish in Louisiana, and she had to pass a voter rights test that I actually took last year and couldn't pass the first time. You know, and my mom was the first Black woman to go to school in her high school when integration kind of broke. And she's like fairly light skinned, so people didn't exactly recognize it. And then when they did, they burned a cross in my grandparents' front yard. And my mom and my grandmother always instilled in me this idea that you don't need to see anyone who looks like you to do something that's a dream you have, right? So there are many people who need to see an example, and I think that that's natural and that's a very normal thing, and we need to have more examples. But then I also think one of the gifts that they gave me was instilling this idea of like, if you have a dream, you know, you might not see someone who looks or has any aspect of your background doing your dream. And that just means that you got to go and be that representation. You got to go and live out the values you have. And then the next person will have a little bit of an easier time, maybe being able to look to you, to how you do that. And just really kind of internalizing that there's no goal I have to have that anyone else has ever done. And then the fact that there are many people who have done firsts over and over. And if you want to have, you know, maybe not in the thing you want to do, but across the board, was a really exciting thing for me. And I found a space where, you know, tech entrepreneurship, there's not actually filled with lots of people of color. But my mom and my grandmother's encouragement to do things where you don't see yourself represented and to give yourself permission to achieve is super key in me wanting to feel free to look to anyone for inspiration, you know, whether that's in history, like I love Edison, I love reading about that. That's actually why I love the Buffalo area. You guys have amazing power history, an amazing kind of American, electric race history with Tesla and Edison. And I look up to those guys. So a lot of members of history, when I stopped needing to see like someone with my story, I could just look for the stories that I thought were inspiring and make them my own. So that's a kind of a weird answer to your question. So now, anytime, like I love frontier stories. I love a lot of stories about the first time people did anything, like when we discovered electricity, or when we, like the whaling industry, or the very first venture capitalists like Queen Elizabeth, or Queen Isabella of Spain. So I love Toussaint Louverture, who is the only guy in world history to successfully run a slave revolt. He did that in Saint-Domingue, which is now modern Haiti. And reading about how he turned slave culture on its head and was able to build one of the most beautiful and elite military feats in human history. That's what made history really interesting to me, that I could be inspired by anyone who did something that no one else ever did.
So is it that like you wanted to make change more than like you wanted to be like a part of history more than like you looked up to them and you wanted to make a difference like them?
Yeah. I think for me, my faith is a really big part of my identity, my relationship with God. And so my desire to let other humans know that there is meaning to life, that they're loved, and that it has nothing to do with their background or what they believe or who they are, but just that humans can take care of each other. That drives me in this really fundamental way. I love passing on knowledge. I think all the pain in my life has been one of the most valuable things to teach others, and to share with others and to go through that. So I look up to, like I said, my mom, my grandmother. I look up to figures of history. Though that's where I get most of my kind of inspiration. Yeah.
Do you feel like your pain in your life is what helped you grow?
Oh, for sure. And I think there's a couple of different types of pain, right? Which I wish I would have known sooner. There's kind of pain that is from performance. So like, when you go for a run or when you exercise, like there's this kind of a maintenance where you break yourself down and then you build back stronger, right? And that's the kind of pain you want. There's also like pain that exists from when you don't take care of things that you need to take care of. And then you kind of bump into those things. Like, it's kind of like if you have a rose garden and there's lots of thorns and you don't prune the thorns, so you run into them and you get hurt, and you'll do that over and over and over again. And that kind of pain is important to like acknowledge it exists, but you want to try to limit it, right? You recognize like, well, am I experiencing pain because I didn't do something I should have done, or am I experiencing pain because I'm working really hard and it's a hard path? And I think, when I look back on my life, now I'm always trying to identify like, okay, what's the source of this pain? Was it self-inflicted? Was there any other way I could have learned it? Is it because I didn't take care of something, or is it because it's just hard? And I think there's a guy named Ray Dalio who has a quote that says, pain plus reflection equals progress. So I think we all have no shortage of pain, but not all of us necessarily reflect or have the space to reflect, whether that's with a mentor, whether that's by ourselves or journaling or through prayer. I think that reflection part is really, really, really important. And then kind of distilling what you learned, taking that time to do that. And if you keep doing that over and over again, you'll start to understand like what you need to be successful personally, not kind of in theory, but like for your own life.
Is it anything you think you would have done differently if you can go back?
Anything I would have done differently? I think there's lots of things that I wish I would have known, right? I think I wish someone would have told me like would have told me about how things work, how I should approach them, about I think it is really hard to be alone, to do things that other people in your social circle haven't done. So there's a lot of lessons there. I tend to not, because like so many things have happened in these very specific ways, I tend to not wish I could go back and change anything about my life, but I do have lots of things that are, um, you know, I wish I would have learned how entrepreneurship worked much sooner. I wish I would have known that. I guess I don't regret the pain I had because it made me who I am, right? But I'm thankful for the lesson so that I don't repeat my mistakes, if that makes sense.
You like believing like everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, and everything happens, and that if I can get a lesson, I've been grateful for every place I've been in. I want to affect my future, but I'm thankful for my past.
That's all. That's all I have.
Those are really great, Gabby. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great questions.
So Devin, talk to us now about GroupRaise and, what you feel led you to this. And then we'll get into a little bit more on the family side. And I'm very conscious of the time too, but just so folks can kind of put the pieces together as to where you are now. And, how maybe high school or that past that we talked through has influenced the evolution of GroupRaise.
Yeah. So, I think GroupRaise, so the very first team I ever built was that band I mentioned. And it was just the opportunity to get like different sounds and different skills together and to create a sound that was better than each one of us as an individual. And that was like a very addictive kind of high, right? When you have a drummer, I played keyboard and I sang, and then we had multiple guitarists and a bass, and a saxophone player, and just like that experience of collecting different ways and approaches and thought processes and skills and then bringing them all together was just awesome. And then that yielded into us building that music festival, and we did that for 3 years. We did 4 festivals over 3 years, and in that process, again, I met, I built a lot of skills through just running my own thing and kind of being the leader of that. I started that, in college. And then right along that time, I met this woman who ran a CDC, which is a community development organization in Houston, that essentially they were working in low-income areas to build houses that could be affordable for first-time homeowners, and a program called Houston Hope. And it was run by HUD in the city of Houston. And I remember, so I helped her, build the development office, which was my first I started a consulting business that helped her raise money for that organization, which I essentially just read a book about grant writing, and then sent her a proposal, and she accepted my proposal. And I think I was 19, and it was like for $75 an hour. And I had been working for $6.50 an hour at the YMCA before that. So that was when I learned that reading was really powerful. Like, books are a way to live 1,000 lives. You can learn someone's whole career and every bit of advice and nugget they have for like $10 or $15, and you can consume that in just maybe 3 hours, or a couple of hours, or even a couple of weeks, or and use it right away. And so I was able to work for $75 an hour at 19, which really then made me think about this. And from that experience with helping them with HUD, HUD had given the city a couple $1 million, a lot, like maybe $10 or $50 million. But then the city hadn't exactly planned out how they were going to spend it. And I got this look into the fact that I was kind of blown away that there would be this huge local budget, and they were going to spend millions of dollars, but no one actually knew how to do it. And that capital allocation is a really hard problem, and that kind of nobody knows what they're doing. And I think that's an important lesson to know, like Gabby, is that nobody knows. Like, don't assume that like these really big institutions or these really big companies or universities, that they know what they're doing. They maybe know how to look like what they're doing, but they don't actually know what to do. Um, and um, and when I came in, again, I was like 19. I was sitting in this, I was talking to the mayor of Houston, and I came up with a financial program to figure out how to actually get HUD money into first-time homeowner buyers. And I built a financial model around that, and that was successfully used. And when I went through that process of running a consulting company, I was making great money, and it was awesome. But I realized that I wanted to not only just come up with plans, I wanted to implement them myself. And I wanted to kind of live or die based on whether my plan was successful, not just whether or not it looked good or whether or not it was there. And then at the time, like I had to work to make money. Like I had to work hours, which is lots of people work to make hours, but I wanted to decouple my my earnings from my time. And I thought building a system was the best way to do that, a system. And so as I was kind of looking for opportunities, GroupRaise was, you know, I'd kind of done a lot of regional things. So I wanted to do something that was national. I wanted to do something that made an impact, because through the music festival and kind of working in low-income communities, like feeling like I was positively contributing to cities and to people's lives was really important. And then I wanted to do something that could be a system where if I slept or if I didn't have to work to make money. And so building a technology product is this interesting thing where, you know, like right now while we're having this conversation, I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands of people using GroupRaise, which is one of the coolest things about building a tech product, you know, and no one has to do anything to make them you know, use the product. And so that was kind of my like framework for thinking about ideas that would allow me to do that. And I knew a bunch of restaurant owners, and I talked to them about their problems. And the very first GroupRaise meal was at a restaurant here in town, and it was an owner who was struggling in the wintertime, who had an ice cream shop. And I was like, I think I could probably bring a large group in here that would drive sales. And he was like, oh, that'd be great. And he said he'd be willing to donate back 20%. And I called up a local organization I knew and asked if they wanted to come. And they said, sure. And I think he thought maybe 30 people would come, and 300 people came. And I just remember seeing how delighted he was. And I saw a lot of people eating, having fun, and they were all supporting a cause. And I thought, like, this is really interesting. Like, if I could build a team and technology around helping these interactions happen, there could be a lot of places that look like this. And, you know, flash forward now, 500 cities later and 10,000 restaurants. That's kind of the origin story and how we're here.
Incredible. Gabby, any last few questions? I know we're running up on our hour and I want to be conscious of that. Any last questions for Devin?
I don't think so, no.
You feel good?
Yeah.
Julie, what about from your side? Anything we should touch on, you know, just to wrap things up?
Yeah, I guess just for our students, like they practice a lot of technical skills, right? Like some might be good at coding or the finances or web design or something, but how important do you feel like the soft skills are, like the not the technical side, but the other side, like what do you think is the most important in your entrepreneurial journey, like as far as your other skills?
Well, the first skill when you bring that up that comes to mind is speaking. So, I mean, 43North happened probably across 13 minutes of my life, right? Like there was lots of things that went, you know, writing and kind of prep that went into that, which is another point, being able to write, like spend time writing about your ideas and being able to communicate what you want to do in writing. But then, I think how long was the pitch for 43 North? The final pitch, it was like 2 minutes.
2 or 3, and then 4 or 5 minutes of Q&A. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think there was like a $1,400 a second, right? If you do the math on that experience. So that, like, getting up and speaking in front of people about your ideas and doing that with conviction and practicing that a lot. Like one of the big moments I had is even when I knew the GroupRaise story, when I took the time to then just practice in front of a mirror, practice with my wife, practice with my mom, I just practiced with like everywhere over and over again. That skill has served me super well. And I think you can get better with practice, and even once you're quote unquote good, you can always get better with practice.
I love that. So important. Okay, well, Devin, this has been wonderful. I know it'll be a fan favorite with the students, as these open, candid, heartfelt conversations really do make an impact. So we really thank you on behalf of 43 North. We're gonna hopefully get about 10 of these wrapped up with our founders and then package them over for the school to use. So we'll keep you across the developments there.
Awesome. And the last thing I would say to students, like from my perspective, is that if you've never heard anyone with your story talk on a stage, that means that when you tell your story, it will be unimaginably captivating. I think the moment when I realized that I could just be who I am with my story, and that no one else will ever have your story, because no one else has lived in your shoes, no one else has been there, and that was actually really powerful. I'd say don't be afraid to tell your exact story. The world needs it. We need you, and it will turn into your superpower. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Of course.
All right, Gabby, anything else?
No.
You're all set. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Devin. So nice to see you. You look wonderful. And good luck.
Right back at you.
Good luck with the little one. We'll be thinking of you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, stay well.
You too. See you guys.
Love.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Gabby.
Bye.
See you soon.
See you soon.